I am, and that's also just fine. This is not about us. This is actually about the things that we've learned as we've worked with hundreds of franchise development professionals and consultants. And we wanted to give back a little to the community here at IFPG. So thanks, Ali, for a chance to give us a voice and a spot to talk to everyone and kind of share what we've seen helps people to really grow their franchise consulting and FranDev operations. And that's kind of what the purpose of the discussion is today. And just as a quick sidebar, ClientTether is a sales automation tool built for franchising and franchise development. We work with a lot of folks at IFPG and lots of other independent consultants and other groups. So just thought that this would be a very good topic for us to share. And what I want to focus on today are just best practices. Like, what are things that we can educate you about that will make a big difference in your business as you're trying to help franchisees find the right place. This is a really critical part of the process. The lead follow-up and the sales is a grind. So if we can help you simplify that in some ways, I'm grateful we get a chance to do it today. But first of all, I want to share a lot of information with you, things you need to know. When you're getting portal leads or you're generating your own leads, there's something critical that happens in the consumer process. Google called this the 0 moment of truth, but they are pretty well educated. They've already done the research. They're looking for an option. Now, if you're buying portal leads, sometimes those are just people that are clicking and they're not sure what they're doing, unfortunately, but still there are a lot of good portal leads out there. But there's a moment of time where they're engaged and they understand what they're thinking about, and you have to immediately engage with them. What we find is that 40% to 50% of sales that are going to be viable, right? If someone's going to buy a franchise, they're qualified, they're going to go down that road, then whoever gets to them first is generally almost 50% of the time the person who's going to close the deal. Some things can happen in the middle of it, but being first matters, not just in home services or in other places, other businesses, but in franchise development as well. It matters a lot. When we talk about other reasons why it matters to immediately engage leads, here's some data. This is from the long-term lead management study from a long time ago. Probably about 7 years ago, I think, is when this came out. But you've seen this data before. I think it's about 1 million data points they analyzed, and they showed that if you talk to your lead when it's first generated within the first 5 minutes, then well, let me invert this. If you wait 10 minutes to call that lead and try to reach them versus reaching them within the first 5 minutes, the likelihood of you talking to them drops 10x. Meaning, and if you wait for 15 minutes, you can see that this trail as it just gets abysmal. If you wait 30 minutes, your likelihood of talking to them is like 100x less. Like, it's a small chance, but it's because people move on, especially legitimate franchise buyers. They are pretty high net worth, they're busy, and so they'll fill out a form, and within a couple of minutes they'll be moving on emotionally to the next thing. And so there's a critical time frame in which you got to reach people, and it's going to dramatically improve your conversion rates, your conversation rates, and help you to spend a lot less time chasing people. Other best practices that we've seen really help in this space are diversity of outreach, the way you engage. And this is interesting because the older demographics, they tend to prefer phone calls and emails. When you're talking like 60 plus, right? But there's been a big shift, even cross-generationally, toward texting, where 55 below, oftentimes that's their preferred medium. If you're talking to people that are 35 and below, sometimes they won't pick up a phone call, they just want to text, which I find a little strange, but that's the way the world works. And now there's this generation of buyers coming into the market looking for franchises that have maybe been involved in a tech startup and have some cash now, or they inherited some money, or they've been very frugal and saved a lot, and now they're ready to buy. Whatever the case may be, that's just an interesting dynamic that we've got to accommodate now in the franchise development world and consulting, that there's this whole generation of people that don't want to talk to you on the phone, that they just want to buy. We've got some clients that they sell home services, and they'll tell me that they're closing $12,000 deals over text messages now, and you guys probably experienced that as well. So, but being able to mix up the blend here, being able to outreach across multiple dimensions, means that you'll also find a medium that client, that prospect, they prefer to communicate in. It might be email, and unless you're communicating across all those different formats, you won't find out. what their preferred medium is to communicate. I had one client that always communicated to me through LinkedIn Messenger for whatever reason. And so that's how we did business. So just kind of meet them where they're at. That's one of the best practices I've seen really help a lot of our consultants do well as they're engaging their leads. Now, we're an automation company, so I felt like this is an important concept just to cover. But the top consultants that I work with, they are looking for ways to automate as much as the process as possible. There are things that computers are just better at, guys, than humans. And there are things that computers will never be able to do as well as humans. At least I don't think so. Having studied artificial intelligence a bit, that consultants can do, right? You can't connect with people. A computer can't do that very well. They can't build a relationship, in the same way that you can. They can't help people really do critical thinking and do a deep dive emotional analysis of where they're going to be happy in buying a franchise concept. Almost everything else, though, you can start building automation around. Things that you've got to automate are getting your leads, whatever your lead sources you're using, you've got to get them as much as automated as possible into your system so there's no gap. If you're getting spreadsheets, I know some of you are getting spreadsheets with resume leads and things like that on a weekly basis. Man, you got to try to work with those folks that are harvesting those to automate the process. Although those aren't as time bound, those are kind of passive lead harvesting tools. But being able to streamline that so you're not using your precious time to import things into CRMs is critical. When you've got leads that are being generated, true leads, not just potential prospects in spreadsheets, you've got to automate the way that you engage. And we'll talk more about this as well, and best practices around automation. But if you're not doing it today, meaning if you have leads that you're buying and you're checking your inbox, and then when you see that lead, you have to decide if you're following up and emailing or calling, then you're already way behind because somebody's got some system that's already probably automating engagement, and many of the portals sell that same lead or prospect to multiple consultants. So making sure you've got an immediate follow-up. My recommendation is actually texting, or you can email immediately and that's fine, but most people don't engage with email. We'll talk about that though, how to make it better. But texting first and then getting on the phone shortly thereafter tends to be the best, and we'll talk about that later. But then you're nurturing. So a big part of success in franchise consulting and franchise development is immediately getting on the phone, but not everyone will talk to you. So being able to develop a process that automatically nurtures leads and continues to engage them over sometimes months, even if they haven't responded to you, is the difference between you getting the deal goal that you want for the year and not. Because those folks that have raised their hand and said, I'm interested in buying a franchise, many of them are still interested, but they're distracted and they're busy. And so being able to continue to nurture them without you putting in the extra effort and consuming your most precious resource, which is your time, to do so is critical. That's another great place where automation makes a big difference in the flow. And Allie, I'm going to pause for a second. I heard a little rustling. Was there a question that came up that you wanted to ask, or was that just a mic brush?
I believe it was just a little glitch there. You're all good to go.
Okay, don't worry about it. I just want to make sure if there were questions, we could pause and take those too. But I know you wanted to do those at the end. So guys, let's talk about this. And I'm not talking about using ClientTether here. I'm talking about whatever system you're using right now, or if your system's not capable of it, we'd gladly share some best practices with you, Ryan and myself, about that after this. But let's talk about what you should be thinking about as you're looking into building automation in your business. There are a few questions you should be asking yourself. I've outlined here on the right. Have you got a defined communication plan? Almost everybody here has a sequence of emails that they're probably sending out to every prospect. We've already talked about we're going to talk about the efficacy of email in a minute and how to make it better. I've had cold emails that I've sent out to people who weren't leads, and I've had 40% click-through rates on those before. But there's a way to do that, and it's not gimmicky at all. It's actually just trying to communicate with people like humans and providing value. So we'll come back to that. But wherever you've got kind of a process you need to follow, that's a great place to start evaluating automation. A big question you've got to also ask is, people get afraid of automation, right? They think, I don't want to use it because it'll make me sound like a robot, and that's not my style. The answer to that question or that concern is that it's actually not true. But if you write your messages like a robot, then you'll sound like a robot. But there's actually a unique communication style you should kind of adopt as you're looking into building out automation. And that's something that we'll talk a little bit about in this presentation as well. So whether or not you're a client of ours or you're not even thinking about it, whatever tool you're using, you should be able to pull really good insights out of this presentation that you can apply today. I want this to be actionable for you guys. That's the whole point of doing this. What the places you also need to focus on are where you can get the best gains. So the initial lead engagement guys, absolutely. We're going to talk about how to re-nurture and re-engage old leads. So you've got a pile of money sitting in a CRM or a spreadsheet or your inbox that we should be able to operationalize. You should be able to find a few more deals out of that. You've already paid for them. So we're going to talk about that too. We already talked about what's your media mix, who are your demographics, and what type of media can you use in your automation, meaning should you be using videos? The answer is yes, by the way. And how do you engage with that media? And then systems, like what tools can you use? Is your tool capable of automating a phone call or an email? Like those are, being the most important tools of the selling process. You got to make sure you've got the right tools for the job. And then setup and maintenance, and if you're using separate tools here, I know a lot of you have kind of a Frankenstack where you've got 3 or 4 different tools kind of cobbled together with Zapier or something. That can work. Making sure that tools talk, especially when we start talking about texting, that's an important process. So good considerations. We're not answering all of those today in this meeting, but if you have questions about any of that, again, happy to be a resource for you. So is Ryan, who's on this meeting as well. Now, let's talk about some tips. So let's say you've got a tool or some tools that you're going to use for this. What are some things that you should be doing that will help you to have legitimate and real engagement with clients and not turn them off with automation? One is tokenizing, and I'll explain what this means. Tokenizing is when most tools that you'll use have the ability to like insert names or like state or a brand or whatever, right, into the actual message automatically. So what you want to do is find the right balance of tokenizing. So you want to find, obviously always engage with their first name. One thing I see done wrong all the time in automation is people's name, they use their names too much. They'll be like, hi, Dave. Hey, it's Chris over here at blah, blah, blah. And I just thought it'd be really nice, Dave, to talk to you sometime about this and this and this. And at the end, they'll say, well, talk to you later, Dave, right? And honestly, just it seems artificial. I would never communicate that way. So you want to find the balance of automating, inserting relevant pieces of data so it feels like a real human-to-human communication. Every message that you send from automation should feel and sound like something you would have personally written yourself. That's the big rule of thumb that I always follow as I'm coaching people on this. But also sometimes it's very relevant if you know you're always going to get that piece of data from a lead form, from an import, however you're getting your leads. For example, like a state or even a city. Sometimes it's really powerful to say something like, "Hey, Dave, it's Chris over at such and such consulting company. Saw you're interested in franchising. Love that you're from Houston. How are things going?" ? Right? And something simple like that can really drive a human-to-human engagement and also make them feel a little more personalized, right, and truly engaged. But there's some unwritten rules. You've already read this slide. I should have actually not had it all show up so we could go through these point by point. But a lot of people, they become too formal in the text in texting, or they become too informal in, let's say, an email. You're not going to use text abbreviations like BRB and things like that, TTY in an email typically, unless you're selling a bunch of bubble tea franchises to 28-year-olds. Maybe they'd like that, but generally that's not your target audience. So, and nothing wrong with bubble tea. Actually, they're great brands, and we work with some of them. But texting, you want to keep casual. You also want to make sure you're not putting emails in there, right? So I've seen some people are sending 700 character long text messages. It's like 3 paragraphs with a signature at the bottom. Don't do it. It immediately tells people that you're not really sending them a message, and that's not the message you want to send, no pun intended, as you're using automation. And keep it brief on text. Also, sequencing. There is a massive impact on your effectiveness of calling people if you text them first. So again, this can be cumbersome if you're manually managing your lead follow-up, but if you are using automation and you can text out of it, you'll send out an email too, that's fine, but send out a text as soon as you can. That's personalized, and then 2 minutes later, then you want to call. and be consistent, because 90% of all texts get read within the first 2 to 3 minutes. But if you text before you call, you can help circumvent some of the reservations people have to pick up the phone nowadays because of all the robo-dialers. There's actually a 40% increase in the answer rate of your phone calls out if you text them first. So again, there's a lot of synergy across the media: texting, calling, emailing. You send out an important email, so follow that up with a text message to say, hey, I just sent you an email a couple minutes ago. Make sure you check your inbox. If you didn't find it, check your spam folder. You'd be surprised what happens to your open rates of your important emails if you do things like that and use the media together, right? And then, well, we've already kind of mentioned this, but don't get too stodgy. People buying franchises is serious. It's a big investment, but nobody wants to talk to a banker, right? Nobody wants to talk to a boring portfolio manager. You really need to engage people and speak to them in your automation the way you would speak to them over the phone. Really be you. And if that is kind of dry and stiff, then be dry and stiff. But my recommendation is, if you want people to engage with you, you got to change that up. Let me show you a couple of funny examples of automation gone wrong. I see this kind of stuff all the time. You know, just like you, I get tons of spam and unwarranted emails. But one thing that they're doing wrong here is the whole email is written about them. We, our, blah, blah, blah. Like, as soon as I start reading emails like this, I'm like, I don't care about you. Like, why are you messaging me? Remember that. Invert your messaging so that it's all about them. I see that you were interested in this. Love to learn more about you. Tell me a bit about you. Like, make the whole email about you, or our clients. A lot of people I work with, they tend to think about X, Y, and Z. I thought that might be helpful for you. So invert it. As soon as I start reading emails like this, I'm like, this is garbage, and I delete it. Also, another bad example, if you're going to be sending out emails to people, as soon as I see an HTML formatted email, just like you, I immediately know a human didn't send this to me. It was done by a machine. I delete them. I almost never read HTML emails unless it's from like IFA or a partner where I know I need to stay in tune with what's going on, because I know it's marketing crap. I don't want to read it. So some of you have grown up in this world where highly HTMLized, stylized emails might have had better click-through rates. I don't know when that was, but I would highly discourage you, since it's a personal sell process, don't use HTML emails, because I'll immediately delete this if you send me one like this if I'm trying to buy a franchise. So here, let me show you an example of how you can use automation very well. In email specifically, I promised we'd come to this. First things first, if you have a tool that allows you to tokenize the subject line, meaning you can pull their first name into the subject line right up here, that's going to increase your open rates by 19 to 20%. That's huge, guys, by the way. That doesn't mean you'll get a 20% open rate. That means if you had a 1% open rate, you'll get like 1.2% open rate. But that's a massive increase in email open rates. Hopefully your open rates are way better than that. But that's an easy thing you can do at any time, and it'll help increase open rates. Another thing that you can do, again, basic greetings. Don't say things like hello or good afternoon, comma, first name token, because sometimes a very specific time bound, like good afternoon, good evening, you might get a lead in the morning, right? So be really careful with that. And also, the word hello is only used by marketers that don't know how to engage with humans. So don't use hello, use hey or hi. Those are the two best read greeting lines that help people move into the content of the email, just so you know. Now, let's talk about video. If you're going to be using email, I highly, highly, highly recommend you find a way to start using videos in your emails. People want to communicate with people, not with words and technology. So if you can embed an image of yourself as a thumbnail and a link to a video inside of an email. I was telling you I had a really successful email campaign where I had like 40% click-through rates on my emails. It was like, there's actually this template that I designed this template for myself and started to use it, and it started to work extremely well. So in your world, you might not make it this ambiguous. You might say video message about franchising from Dave. And they'll be like, oh, well, I just filled out that form. This is cool. And then they'll have an introductory video to you, and they'll connect with you through the video in a way they can't through your words. Now, also, you want to have a way for them to schedule time with you. Always, always, always. If you're not using Calendly or something like it now, guys, get on it. It's free, and there's no reason you shouldn't use it. But it's a very powerful tool. There are tons of them. Cloud HQ, if you're a Google user, there are tons of them out there that do it just fine. Calendar One Calendar. So find a tool like that and make sure you can embed a link in your messages and every message so that people you reach out to have a way to take action and call attention to it. Grab some time on my calendar, make sure there's a clear call to action in your emails that's not pushy, and you'll find people will engage. Now, I'm going to move on to nurturing. So those are some tips and tricks of ways with initial lead engagement. The only other tip I will say is just pick up the phone. Like, make sure you're calling people and calling them as soon as you can. But usually it'll take 6 to 8 attempts to get someone on the phone, and that's annoying. But the more you try to reach them, the more touches you have, the more likely you are to convert them into an opportunity. So just don't forget the phone. It's hard work, but the grind is worth it because it generates outcomes. Without the inputs, you get no outputs. Let's talk about nurturing. So you've initially reached out and they haven't engaged right away. What do you do with them? These oftentimes are still people that are really interested. They have the net worth. They just got busy. So how do you stay relevant to them so that when the time comes for them to truly make a decision and move forward, you're the one that they call rather than going back out on Franchise Gator and because that's where Google pushed them and filling out another form and talking to somebody new. So let's talk about that. Just take a look at some of this data here, right? 6 to 8 attempts to make a contact with the lead. Most people on average make 1.5. I doubt that statistic is very different in franchise consulting. And I mean no disrespect, but this is in corporate enterprise sales, right? Some of you haven't been in sales before and you're starting to try to really work through this sales and consulting process. It takes effort and touches. So you just have to reach out to people multiple times. If somebody filled out a form and said, hey, I'm interested in franchising, and then they got frustrated with you because you tried to reach them, it's not really a problem on your side of the equation, right? Now, the only time you run into that consistently is if you're using a portal that sells that lead to 4 or 5 different consultants and you're the last one to call. At that point, they're like, dude, I'm being pounded by 4 or 5 people, like just leave me alone. That's a good indication if you've run into that you're too slow. And that's, again, back to the automation and engagement immediacy. But 75% of marketing leads never convert into sales because nurturing, it doesn't happen, right? And then look at this bottom left. You would close an average of 50% more sales if you had an active lead nurturing program, and it costs 33% less because you have to buy fewer leads to get the outcomes you want. And because nurturing programs don't usually cost anything. You just set them up and let them run. So lots of good data to support it. I don't think you need me to sell you on this, but let's talk about how do you build an effective nurturing effort. And what do I see working well that you can implement today? First of all, we talked about this, having the right mix. So make sure you're engaging over multiple media, email, text, phone. If you are working with high net worth people and they start to fizzle out, but you know they're qualified, you might do some creative stuff, like put a box of brownies in the mail. We have services that plug into our tool that do stuff like that, but there are cool tools out there you can use without any CRM attachment that you could do things like send a card in the mail. If I'm a high net worth person and I get a card in the mail from somebody who's wanting to sell me a franchise, I guarantee that's the only person on the planet that's doing that they might have talked to. So you stand out. It's about differentiating yourself and making sure they understand you're there for the long haul. Those are things I've seen help high net worth people make decisions. Now, social. As you start working with somebody, I highly recommend you reach out on LinkedIn. Grow your network. Because even though they might not buy today, 2 years from now, as you're posting content on LinkedIn about a cool franchise success story of somebody that you helped get into a cool multi-unit deal, that might trigger something in them later on. So grow your network as you try to engage with these people. And sometimes they'll message you back on LinkedIn and they won't respond to your text message. Don't ask me why. But it's just one more channel you can use to try to engage people. And there are tools, guys, we're not one of them, but there are tools that can automate engagement through LinkedIn. Just a word of caution, you probably know this, a lot of you, but LinkedIn changed its algorithms recently. So you gotta be very careful as you engage through automation on LinkedIn, because I know people that have had their accounts shut down by LinkedIn because they tried to reach out to too many people per day, per week. So anyway, be cautious as you do, but if there's someone who's reached out to you, you've got good reason to reach out to them there. And then, on-site and virtual meetings. Obviously, the pandemic's made on-site a little more difficult, but some of the top performing franchise folks that I know, franchise consultants, they are meeting with people face-to-face as much as possible, but also seeing people eye to eye through a Zoom, through a Google Meet, doesn't matter. That's a powerful way to make sure you're engaging. And then let's talk about cadence. So cadence and messaging and media are the three things you've got to pay attention to. We've talked about media, right? Like texting, calling, email, brownies. We've talked about messaging a bit, like how do you craft messages that are better suited for automation or even in general. But let's talk about cadence. This is the kind of the frequency with which you reach out to people, and it's different. The first thing you've got to pay attention to is what are your customers' expectations, right? If this, and I'll give you two examples. One is if somebody fills out a form on your website saying, hey, I want to know more about franchising, versus you getting a list of people who are executives from a service that have their resumes posted that they might be looking for a job. You're going to engage those two groups of people very differently. The new inbound lead, there's an expectation of immediacy that you'll reach out. In fact, they get a little frustrated when you don't reach out in a timely manner, meaning in a few minutes. This world has changed where it's not acceptable anymore to call somebody back 30 minutes later. They'll be like, dude, where have you been? I've had 4 conversations since I filled out your form. So just coming back to immediacy, you got to make sure you do that. But the expectations of that experience are totally different now on the other side of the house, where you bought a list, right? You looked up some resume folks. You're not going to want to send them an email and then 2 minutes later send them a text and then 3 minutes later call them. That'd be inappropriate and socially abnormal. So you got to pay attention to those cues. And also, the longer, let's say it's a new lead that came through and you've reached out via email, text, and phone call on day 1, then you might text them day 2, send them an email day 3. Then you got to start looking at, okay, what are their expectations? Do they want a day by day touch, or do I maybe call them on day 4, and then email them on day 6, and then start to slow down that cadence a little bit so it aligns better with their level of engagement to you? You got to kind of read the room, and since you're automating this, it's best to make sure you start to slow the process down a bit as time goes on. So nurturing, how long should you do it? With a big purchase like this, I would recommend you nurture people for a while, for months. But you slow that cadence down, so it might be every 3 weeks for a little while, then maybe every 4, then every 5 weeks, right? So you slow the cadence down, so you're staying in front with relevant content that's value adding, but you don't want to be messaging them every week after it's been a month since they filled out your form, because that person's trying to tell you something by their absence of communication. Just a couple of tips as well. As you're nurturing, as you're engaging leads, just in general, you want to have kind of a give, take approach where you're providing value and you're providing value and you're providing value, and then you're asking for, you have a hard ask, a big ask, right? Like a referral, or, don't underestimate the power of asking someone who never bought a franchise from you for a referral to someone who might be interested in a franchise. You'd be shocked how often people say, that's a good point. I never thought of that, but my cousin Steve actually just sold his tech company and he's trying to figure out what to do next. So they're part of your potential sphere of influence. Don't forget to ask for things that you might be able to get from them, even if they're not going to buy from you. Also, you want to have nudges, right? You want to regularly say, hey, let's use the link below, grab some time with me, and let me educate you a bit more about how to prepare financially to buy a franchise. If you got another nurturing message you might send out is, hey, if you got a 401k, a lot of people are converting their 401ks, rolling them over, buying private stock, and doing cool things where they can use that money to operationalize a business. If you want to learn more about it, let me know. I have some partners that are experts in that. You just never know which value-added touch you're going to send might resonate with them at that time, and regardless of if it does, you're establishing your expertise along the whole way, and that's kind of what you want to do, is really stand out as an expert and make sure that they know that you know what you're doing. They'll refer people to you, and they'll also come back to you rather than go to Google when the time comes to buy. And we already talked about this, but there are a lot of ways you can coach people. You need to use video as much as possible, so you're not just a message in their inbox. They see you as a human when they get that message from you, and make it fun. Go stand on your roof and record a video that's a little bit quirky, but really is you, and people will actually like and appreciate that authenticity. Okay, guys, we talked about this a bit, but I want to jump into texting for a second because a lot of you aren't. I also know some of you, there are some groups that have really made some big mistakes texting because it is regulated. So I'm going to share a little bit of nerdy stuff with you today too, but you guys know the story of email, right? As soon as it came out a long time ago, people started to say, wait a minute, I can use and abuse this platform of communication to broadcast my message far and wide. Well, as a net result, 15 years later, 20 years later, now nobody's reading their emails as much. It still can be effective, but it's just not as effective. Whereas emails or text messages, 90% are read in the first 3 minutes. You guys know this, 20% of links that are texted get clicked versus 2% in emails. It's pretty crazy, the impact. However, I want you guys to read the one in the bottom middle here, 45% average response rate for SMS. Business SMS is lower than that, especially like a lead follow-up, but you might still be 20 to 30% response rate. This is an important thing to remember, because if let's say you want to re-engage a bunch of old leads, so you send a text message out to 1,000 people over a couple of days, bear in mind that might be 200 or 300 responses you need to be able to handle. If you're in meetings for the next 2 days solid, don't send out 500 text messages. Also, you want to be careful, and we'll get to that in a minute, but you want to be careful how you engage people with text, and you have a system that can automate TCPA compliance, because that can get you in trouble. I do know some organizations in this space that have gotten in a little bit of trouble for that because they're texting the wrong people without permission. So we'll cover that. But you guys get this, right? Most people have 0 unread text messages. People are all, they respond to text messages from a business within an hour, 74% versus 41%, right? We spend all this time on our phones, check their smartphone within 15 minutes of waking up. You're going to reach people through text. I don't think you need me to preach more about that, but it's a question of how do you operationalize it and use it effectively. One note that you should be paying attention to is when you text people. A lot of you guys are talking to people all over the country. One of the best times to text people is over the lunch hour, because they are not in a meeting typically. They are probably on their phone. And if your text message comes through then it's a pretty effective time for them to actually respond to you also. So, and at the last quarter of every hour, so 10:45 or 11:45 or 12:45, people tend to be getting out of meetings and tend to have a little bit of flex time later in the hour. So again, a couple of tips as far as when you should text. Again, we've talked about this, making sure your messaging is appropriate for the medium. So again, don't put in a 500 character message. Keep it simple, keep it clean, and also be a little bit more casual in your language there. And then I just talked about this, but make sure you have resources available to respond to people, because if you, and make sure you're using two-way texting, not broadcast. There are some broadcast texting tools out there that will just blast out text messages, but if people can't respond to them and you can't easily see their responses, you're going to tick people off. They get more mad about getting a text message and responding and not getting a timely response than not texting at all, just so you know. And also make sure it's value added. Don't just constantly say, hey, you want to buy a franchise? You want to buy a franchise? Give them value. Educate them about things. Share links with them that are valuable about the franchising process. Be smart about it and think about how you want to be communicated with. Kind of follow the golden rule, and it won't lead you astray when it comes to how you communicate with people. Last bullet, super important though, guys. You need to use tools that can automate your compliance. For example, if you're just texting people randomly from your own phone, or you buy a broadcast tool, or you have your CRM on one side and you've got a texting tool on the other side, and they don't talk to each other, one thing that can happen is you can run into TCPA problems. So this is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. I only bring this up because I know in this industry, in franchise consulting, some of the groups, not IFPG, but some of the groups have gotten in trouble because they're getting lead lists without opt-in permission, and then they're just text blasting people. That's not okay. So let's talk a little bit about how you manage texting and how you make sure you're staying compliant with it. Sorry, this is boring, but this is really important. So hopefully this is helpful, guys. First of all, opt-in is required for texting. Email, it's not. You can email anybody on the planet you want. You can buy a list and email them. You just have to follow CAN spam compliance, which means they have to be able to opt out of your email, and every message you send to them from a business to a consumer or business to business, you need to have a description in your unsubscribe about who you are, where you're sending the message from, and who the message is intended toward. That is required, by the way. So if you're not doing it today, you should probably make sure that your emails are CAN spam compliant, since you're a business entity messaging people as a consultant. So let's talk about texting. So opt-in is required on mobile, and this is only when if you have like a short code, like text pancake to 6678, and IHOP will send you a free coupon to get free pancakes. before they can text you back, if it's a mobile only opt-in where you're texting for the opt-in, they have to have you opt in twice, essentially. Web opt-in is what you guys are dealing with, which is you've got a landing page on your website with a form. You're buying leads from a portal who has an opt-in message. When if you ever run into like a new scrappy lead provider, you want to make sure you ask them, do they have opt-ins for their leads? So you know if you've got permission, and then make sure you look at it so you understand that you have permission to text them if they sell you a lead. Some people don't. Some people are harvesting contacts off of like LinkedIn and selling those, and but not contacting them first, not making sure they have permission and selling them. And you can get in a little bit of trouble doing that. So just be cautious. Make sure if you're buying leads, you understand that they've got an opt-in process. Also, you need to educate the person as you're texting them in the first message about opt-out. You've all seen it. Hey, reply stop if you don't want any more messages. That's required if you're a business and you're texting a consumer, a potential consumer. You also want to systematize your compliance. You want to make sure if somebody replies stop, that you have a way to make sure that you don't text them again, so you can enforce compliance. So those are the types of things we have on our platform. A lot of platforms will do things like that, but you want to make sure, especially if you're using an experimental texting tool or a plugin, that you know when somebody's opted out and it will enforce that. Otherwise, I can't remember what it is, like $1,500 or something. It's pretty expensive, the fines you can get charged per infraction. Now, let's talk about your forms on your websites. A lot of you guys are building your own web pages and you've got a form for people to fill out. 2 of these forms are not compliant with TCPA opt-in, and one of them is. I'm guessing you can figure out which one it is. But if you look at the language down below, I'm going to draw on here for a second, you can see this is the only form here that has an actual opt-in message. Often you want to have it above the submit button. A CAPTCHA is not, this is not compliant. There's no opt-in message. This has nothing at all. It doesn't have an opt-in. So you can't text anybody who fills out this form. You can't text anybody who fills out this form, according to TCPA compliance, right? So just be cautious about that you want to have an opt-in as on your forms if you've got a form on your own website. Okay, now let's go on. Let's move on to some other topics here. There we go. Sorry, I just had to get rid of my pen. CCPA, if you guys are selling in California, it's a little complicated, guys. California is good at making things complicated, but there's some rules about deleting customer information when they ask you to. I'm not going to go into this too much, but I want you to be aware. TCPA is for texting compliance. CAN-SPAM is for email compliance. California's CCPA is kind of a way for the state to try to generate more revenue by being able to sue big businesses. But the only thing you need to pay attention to is if somebody responds to you who's in California and says, get my name off your list, you need to delete them. Unfortunately, that's a little bit at odds with TCPA rules. So they're still trying to sort that out in the courts. But unless there's a compelling reason you shouldn't, because you've had a mean or a bad or a really good engagement, you just need to delete them so that they're not in your database. That's kind of the crux of CCPA. Since you guys aren't selling customer data lists, you don't have to worry about it. That's the bulk of it. So, but again, I'm not an attorney, guys, so I'm just here to give you some good guidelines to follow. But if you have real questions about this, what your opt-in statement should say underneath on your web forms, make sure you consult with a professional about it. But you need to understand the basic high-level rules and guidelines so you don't make big mistakes accidentally. That's the intent of me sharing that with you. Okay, let's shift on to topics that'll help you generate more revenue. And I want to leave time for Q&A as well. So hope you don't mind a few more tips. This is an actual chart from an actual client who's in FranDev who had a bunch of leads and said, you know what, I want to do a test. I've got a bunch of dead leads. I'm going to take 40 dead leads. I'm going to put them in a nurturing campaign. These are people who never responded once to one of her messages. And she's good. She's been doing this for a long time. Lovely person. And so she put 40 people in this test campaign just to re-engage and kind of nurture them. And these were the results after like 30 days. She had closed a deal. She had 4 people in FDD review meetings. She'd sent an FDD out to 3 people. She'd had 1 person with an application submitted. she'd only had 5% actually respond and say they're not interested. She had 21% opt out, right? She had 4 people out of 40, so 10% that they got all the way down the road and then they just couldn't get funding worked out. So she lost them because they didn't have funding. But look at all the conversations that she's had just by re-engaging old leads. A lot of you have been doing this for a long time. You have the ability to systematically re-engage, let's say 50 people a day into perpetuity, right? Because you've got thousands of contacts that you've engaged in the past. My strong recommendation to you is create a re-engagement nurturing campaign that just starts to provide value and reaches out to people. And you would be shocked how many of them, and if you go 4 or 5 years back, 3 years back, you're kind of getting out of relevance. But if you go a year back, 6 months back, and 3 months back and re-engage leads, even a couple of months back, you'll start to see that people they re-engage with you. And not all of them, right? 34% got contacted and never really moved on. So over 50% didn't go anywhere from kind of the get-go, or a little over 50%. But look at all the engagement that she had just because she put them in a drip campaign. Also, guys, referrals. Many of you are not asking your clients for referrals, but referrals, they close at 17 times in some industries the average close rate of other leads. And I don't know if it's that high in franchise consulting, but it's high. All of you probably know that. 61% of customers will make a referral if you ask them. 34% will make 2 to 10 referrals. 5% of your customers will make 11 referrals. Who here is asking your customers more than twice for a referral? Probably none of you. And if you are, awesome, high five. But you guys need to make sure that you're engaging with customers in ways that help them to give you referrals. And just so you know, this number is actually higher now. 3 out of 4 are engaging peers on buying decisions. It's like 90% now. And they also trust online reviews. Now, I don't know, we're not going to talk about reviews today. That's something else we could help you with. But if you're not doing online reviews for your franchise consulting business, that's something you might consider. It can help in a lot of ways, but you need social reinforcement of the value that you're bringing. A couple of testimonials buried on your website usually doesn't do it. So it might be worthwhile to think about how to do that as well. But if you look at the way that people are most successfully giving referrals, it's often you're asking for it. You're on the phone saying, hey, who do you know? I know that you're doing really well now with this, 2 Maids and a Mop franchise that you just bought. Who do you know that might also do really well in this space or in another franchise? And you'd be surprised how many people can give you a referral at that point. A couple things that are effective in referral programs is just, first, you've got to be a rock star and take good care of them. They've got to want to help you first. Usually that comes from them feeling like they owe you one because you bent over backward for them. But then, and also, you sleep really well at night, guys, when you treat people right. And your reputation precedes you, I promise. So, but then you just need to have effective re-engagement processes and retention. Stay in touch with them, give them value and tips and tricks. Don't drop them. And then target people that are happy, people that are successfully operating franchises, making money. Maybe give them about 90 days to 6 months so they're actually in that profit phase and they're happy and rolling in the dough. Then have a process to ask them then. But the most important step is you just got to ask. You really just have to ask. There's also a honeymoon phase when people first buy a franchise. The first 3-4 weeks, that's another great time to ask for referrals. You can also do incentives. Incentives are a two-edged sword, where you want to be cautious not to over-incentivize so it becomes insincere, because if the lead catches wind of that, then it kind of blows up deals. It feels insincere, but a lot of people have done it very well. You can see examples here already, like Harry's. Good heavens, like that's a brand that came out of nowhere like a rocket ship for men's shaving equipment, if you don't know them. And it was mostly driven by their referral program that they put in place. So, and again, last bullet here is just ask them again. You saw the slide before. Some of your customers might give you up to 10 referrals if you just keep asking them. Give them value, give, and then ask. Give, and ask. It's a really good rhythm that helps it feel like you're really providing more value than you're taking. And guys, that's all that I have as far as content. I hope that was valuable. I probably brought up a bunch of things that would give you questions you want to ask. So I'd like to use our remaining time, Allie, if you're okay with that, to kind of field questions and see what we can do to help. Oh, actually, one more thing before I do. Allie, I apologize. I was hoping, I know, is Chris on the call?
Yes, he is. Yep.
I am. I'm still on the call. Can you guys hear me?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Hey guys, so I know one of your own, Chris he's a rock star. He's a client of ours, but also a friend. I really appreciate what I see from him. I thought it'd be nice to let him, rather than just hear from Dave, let one of your peers share for a few minutes, if you don't mind, Chris. What are you doing right now that helps, streamline your process and really make you effective at lead follow-up and nurturing and engaging your prospects?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for doing the presentation and having me here. I've been using ClientTether, guys, since February. IFPG did a great job giving me an initial CRM system to kind of start off with as I transitioned into this industry and consulting. And I started looking at other CRM services, and I'm going to tell you, I started with a company called Zoho, and it's another vendor who uses their platform, and they really dropped the ball pretty significantly. I called Red and I said, look, I need to look at other platforms pretty quickly. I'm very unhappy with the service and the time expectation. I called Dave literally just right towards the end of the year of last year. And I said, look, this is a situation. Let me tell you, the speed of service that Dave gave me was far from excellent. His team, Shay, I believe, Kurt, who's my rep, they're outstanding. Yeah. And a lot of the things that Dave has talked about is extremely true. It increased my business efficiency and effectiveness in ways that I can't even describe. And even though I'm not even a year in, while no company is perfect, there's no CRM that's going to be perfect. The service that they provide, the education that they're providing me is quite substantial. So I want to lead off with that. Dave, I think you were wanting me to talk about my follow-up with my customers. Is this correct? Can I ask, what do you want me to speak about?
Absolutely. Yeah. You're a top performer. I mean, I'd love just for you to share a couple of tips, like, hey, these are things that I'm doing, because you're kind of among peers. Like, these are things that you find are helping you close more deals and get more people qualified. Whatever that is, share kind of your experience, what you do.
Yeah, guys. So, it's not just me using the ClientTether. I also have a brand new coach underneath me that's also using ClientTether, and he's doing quite well. In his first 6 months, closing several deals already and moving forward. So he's been using ClientTether since day one. One of the biggest things that I would say is having a solid CRM does make sense. It makes complete sense. I never had texting capabilities. I didn't have the robust drip email campaign that ClientTether offers. I do not use their phone service to make online calls. It's not something that I feel is a need for me, but it could be a need for somebody else, especially if you want to record calls. So they're constantly improving on things, especially on calendars. For months, we've been working on getting syncing in your calendar and things of that nature. They just got that done recently, and it's been great. One thing that I do with my customers, when I get a new lead in, I definitely call them that same day multiple times. But what I find out that most consultants fail is that, or give up on a lead, is if they're not responding, is they give up on them extremely quickly. While ClientTether has helped me to form really nice texting and email campaigns that maybe I would have no experience doing, and now that I'm more experienced in it, I never give up on any of my candidates. I continuously call my candidates. In between breaks, I'm constantly calling leads, even if I've called them 8, 9, 10 times. Now that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but I'm not sure if any of you guys on this call have multiple numbers, but if you have a different phone number, call your candidates from a different phone number. You'll be surprised how they reach. They'll pick up the phone. Actually, during this webinar, I had a candidate, new lead, come in through ClientTether, respond to a ClientTether automated message that I did nothing but just set it up with ClientTether. And they set it up, they called me and asked me if I was available today at 2:30. Obviously I'm not, because I'm extremely busy with my calendar too. And I offered them another time. So I guess you have to be extremely consistent. You have to rely on ClientTether with their experience talking with ZORs and with consultants. And I think when you have a new lead that comes in, you have to call them. Don't give up on the third call. People are busy. They don't even have a clue what number you're calling them from. If you're like me, I don't answer calls. So I leave I'll leave the ClientTether text message, but it's automated. But I'll also send a personal text message from my cell phone. And I have another system that I use that I send another text message from that system. So they're getting bombarded by multiple numbers. I'll see my name, and I'll even emphasize that, hey, this is my personal number I'm calling you from, or this is a company number that I'm calling you from, but I've also sent you something from our internal system as well that you can respond. So I can say that ClientTether, since this is a ClientTether conversation here, there's a lot of CRMs that I could have gone with and I can still go with. The service that David's team provides is superior from anything from a service perspective that I've seen from anybody. I could easily leave for something cheaper. There's plenty of cheaper CRMs. They're not the cheapest, but godly, are they efficient and are they helpful and they're kind and they're quick to respond. And when they're messing up, they're working on things behind the scenes. So if you need something that's efficient, effective, and great customer service, guys, I highly, highly recommend ClientTether. Red recommended me to Dave, and if it wasn't for Dave's quickness and understanding my situation in a time crunch, he didn't throw me to the trash and say, hey, look, call me after the holidays, I'm busy. He got on it immediately and took care of me, and I felt like I was super valued. And I can tell you, because of that, he has me as a customer today. I've added another team member, and I'm looking at additional team members to continuously use their system, and they're constantly improving. So if you need efficiency, I think this company will help take your business to a new level. It'll reduce your time. The CRM system from IFPG was good to get started, but I was doing a tremendous of manual work. I was texting every customer before missed calls. The system does it for me, so I'm extremely more efficient. The drip campaigns have gotten me customers from when I first started from my initial leads, and I can tell you it's paying dividends in the amount that it costs to work with them. So I highly recommend them.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And guys, the key takeaway there that I would love for you to remember, although I love your feedback there, Chris. Thank you. That's kind of you. Is that Chris is a hustler. He just hustles. And I don't know very many franchise consultants that hustle as much as Chris, but the reason he's so successful is because he's got a good system in place to automate the minutia, and he spends his time reaching out over the phone and calling people. And I just think, Chris, when you and I have talked and I've seen how you work, I've been hyper impressed, but I know there's a direct correlation to the inputs that create the outputs. So those of you who are wondering, how do I pick up the pace and grow my business? That's what I wanted you to get from Chris, is he's really he's busting it on the phones, and he's calling people more than once. And a lot of you might just try to call once or stick to email. It just isn't good enough. That's not how you're going to grow your business. So thanks, Chris. That was awesome. Allie, do we have questions? I know we've got a few minutes left. I'd love to field any if anybody's got questions we can answer.
We do have one question here. What medium do you recommend for recording video messages to be sent to leads by email?
Oh, great question. So there are a couple. I actually have a link to one of them in that email I was showing you. I use a tool called Vidyard. See that Vidyard? You can actually use a free version of it, guys. I did for about 5 years. I used the free version. It was great. You can just get a little plugin on your browser, click it, record yourself right then, create a thumbnail, and copy and paste it into an email. It integrates with G Suite. You can copy and paste them right into ClientTether. Like I love Vidyard. But I know people that love BombBomb, but you have to pay for it. There are a bunch of other tools now that do it. Vidyard was, I think, one of the first years ago. I found them, and so I like them a lot. But yeah, that's a great question. But it's easy. That's what you want. You just want it to be easy. And also, guys, a tip about videos: don't freak out so much about it. Like, you don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be stiff and stodgy and well produced. People actually like to see you in your home. They want to see you on your front porch. They want to hear you stammer a little bit and not be perfect in everything you say. I actually only shoot any video once, typically, unless like I drop a pen in the middle and I swear or something. Like, otherwise it's a one take video, and I actually like the fact that I don't nail it every time. People find that kind of endearing. So be authentic and real in your videos, and people will watch them and engage with you more.
Awesome. Well, that is the only question that we have in here for now. Fantastic presentation, Dave. Thank you so much for your time today. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you with Dave, or you can also find their contact information on the ClientTether listing page as well on the IFPG site. So again, thank you everybody for your time today. I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you guys soon.